The carriage rattled through Vienna's first district as Eleonora watched the transformed city through frost-etched windows. 7 years since the night Duke Sebastian von Reichardt publicly destroyed her. 7 years in a convent, transforming pain into purpose. "Tell me, sister," Eleonora said to her companion, "do you believe in prophecy?" Sister Margaretha's hands stilled on her rosary. Men often claim divine insight when they merely seek earthly power. What Duke Sebastian did was cruelty, not prophecy. The Hofburg Palace rose before them, and Eleonora's practiced serenity masked her hammering heart. She was no longer the humiliated 17-year-old. That girl was gone. Her brother, Friedrich, waited in the west drawing room, aged and worn. "Eleonora, you've changed. 7 years in a convent tends to have that effect." The barb landed deliberately. "Why did you summon me back, Friedrich?" His shame was visible. "The estate is failing. We need your dowry, your advantageous marriage. I'm a commodity you can trade for financial stability," she finished. "I'll help save our family. But in return, you'll help me discover why Sebastian destroyed me, and you'll stand with me when I expose the truth." Friedrich paled. "Sebastian is one of the most powerful men in Vienna. If you move against him, then I move knowing the full cost," a servant interrupted. "Prince Konstantin Volkonsky requests an audience regarding your father's last correspondence." The Russian prince entered like winter wind made flesh, dull, dark-haired, dangerous. "Your father discovered documents before he died." "Documents someone killed to keep secret." Eleonora's pulse quickened. "My father's riding accident, murder," Constantine confirmed. "His horse was drugged. I'd been searching for what he hid for 2 years. Together we could find it. And if we do, we burn down the lies together." The door burst open again. Sebastian von Reichardt filled the doorway with commanding presence. 7 years had refined him into something almost unbearably intense. All grey-blue eyes, cold as winter, shadows beneath them suggesting sleepless nights. "Eleonora." Her name was complicated on his lips. "I heard you'd returned. Your sudden concern for my reputation is curious, given you destroyed it 7 years ago." Sebastian met her gaze steadily. "Yes, I was. And I've regretted it every day since." The admission silenced her. This wasn't the arrogant duke she remembered. "Will you come to tomorrow evening's gala at the Belvedere?" he asked. "Vienna needs to see you're not afraid." "I'm not afraid, I know. You never were." His slight smile was sad. "But Leonora. Be careful. Vienna isn't safe for those who seek truth." After he left, Constantine spoke grimly. "Sebastian's wife died 3 years ago, fell from her balcony during a storm. But many believe she was murdered. Like your father. Like others who knew too much. Then we find out what they knew," Eleonora said, her voice steel. "And we expose it." The Belvedere Palace glowed like a jewel box against the winter darkness. Every window blazing with candlelight, music spilling from its doors into the frozen gardens where ice sculptures stood sentinel. Eleonora's carriage joined the long line of vehicles depositing Vienna's elite at the palace entrance, each occupant more extravagantly dressed than the last. She'd chosen her gown with strategic, precisioned, deep emerald silk that matched her eyes, cut in the latest French fashion, with a neckline that was daring without being scandalous. Her dark hair was arranged in intricate braids wound with silver ribbon, leaving her neck bare except for a single strand of pearls that had been her mother's. She looked exactly what she was, a lady of quality, education, and consequence. Let them remember the girl. Let them reckon with the woman. Sister Margarethe had remained at the townhouse Friedrich had secured for their stay. This was not a world for nuns, and they both knew it. Instead, Eleonora was accompanied by Baroness Claudia von Ebstein, a distant cousin who'd agreed to serve as her chaperone. Claudia was 60, sharp-tongued, and had never particularly cared what society thought of her, which made her perfect for the task. "Remember," Claudia murmured as they approached the entrance, "they want to see you falter. Every eye will be watching for signs of shame or anger. Give them nothing but grace." "I've had 7 years to practice grace," Eleonora replied. The entrance hall was a symphony of excess marble columns rising to a frescoed ceiling, twin staircases curving upward like swans' necks, and everywhere, people. Diplomats in military dress, ladies in silks worth small fortunes, servants weaving through the crowd with champagne and delicacies. The air was thick with perfume, ambition, and barely concealed hostility. The moment Eleonora entered, conversation didn't stop, it transformed. Voices dropped to urgent whispers, fans slapped open to hide moving lips, heads turned with the synchronization of a flock of birds. "Lady Eleonora von Steinberg," the herald announced, his voice carrying across the entrance hall, "and Baroness Claudia von Ebstein." Every face turned toward them. In that moment, Eleonora felt the weight of 300 gazes, each one remembering the last time they'd seen her humiliated, crying, being led from the golden ballroom, while Sebastian's prophecy echoed through the space. She smiled, not a shy smile, not an apologetic smile, but a radiant expression of complete confidence. Then she descended the stairs with her head high and her steps measured, acknowledging no one and nothing except her own right to be there. "Masterfully done," Claudia whispered. "Half of them are terrified already." They'd barely entered the main ballroom, another exercise in Baroque excess, with gold leaf covering every surface and crystal chandeliers reflecting candlelight into 1,000 shimmering points, when a familiar figure appeared, Lady von Steinberg. Countess Amalia von Hofburg swept forward in a gown of rose silk that clashed violently with her Toura red lips. "How unexpected to see you here. I thought you'd taken permanent vows, Amalia." Sebastian's cousin, and one of the chief architects of Eleonora's social destruction 7 years ago. She'd been beautiful then, and was beautiful still, but there was something brittle in it now, something desperate in the way she smiled. "Countess," Eleonora replied with perfect courtesy, "how lovely you look. That shade of pink is very bold." It was such a mild comment, but delivered with just enough emphasis that several nearby ladies tittered. Amalia's smile tightened. "I must say we're all simply dying to know what brings you back to Vienna," Amalia continued, her voice carrying just far enough to ensure others could hear. "Surely not to revisit old humiliations. On the contrary," Eleonora said smoothly, "I've come to create new triumphs. The past, after all, is merely prologue." Before Amalia could respond, the orchestra struck up a waltz, that scandalous dance that had shocked Viennese society just a few years earlier, with its intimate hold and rapid turns. Couples flooded onto the floor, a swirl of color and motion that seemed to represent the entire chaotic energy of the Congress itself. Lady von Steinberg. Eleonora turned to find Constantine at her elbow, magnificent in his diplomatic uniform, offering his hand with a slight bow. "Would you honor me with this dance?" It was perfectly appropriate, a visiting prince dancing with a lady of the Austrian nobility. It was also a statement, a declaration of alliance that everyone in the room would note and interpret. She placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted, Your Highness." The waltz was everything she'd forgotten about. Vienna movement and music, the press of bodies in the crowd, the dizzying turns that made the ballroom blur into a kaleidoscope of gold and crystal. Constantine was an excellent dancer, leading her through the steps with easy confidence. "You've made quite an entrance," he murmured as they turned. "Half the room is scandalized, and the other half is intrigued. Which half are you in?" she asked. His smile was enigmatic. "I'm in the third half, the one that's attempting to protect you from yourself. I don't need protection, don't you?" His hand tightened slightly at her waist as they spun. "There are forces at work in Vienna that make social scandal look like child's play. Last night I had my rooms searched. Very professionally, very thoroughly. They found nothing because I'd anticipated it. But the message was clear." "What message?" "That someone knows I'm investigating. That someone wants me to stop. And now you've associated yourself with me publicly. That makes you a target too." The waltz carried them past a cluster of Austrian diplomats, past Amalia's glaring face, past mirrors that multiplied their reflection into infinity. Eleonora caught a glimpse of her, self-flushed from dancing, eyes bright, alive in a way she hadn't been in years. "I've been a target since I was 17, she said quietly. "At least now I understand the game. Do you?" Constantine's dark eyes searched her face. "Or do you think you do, which is far more dangerous?" The music swelled toward its conclusion, the final turns growing faster, more urgent. And then, "May I cut in?" Sebastian appeared beside them, as if summoned by thought alone. He was dressed entirely in black, except for a silver waistcoat embroidered with subtle patterns that caught the light. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Eleonora with an intensity that made her breath catch. Constantine's jaw tightened. "The dance is nearly over. Then this will be brief." Sebastian's tone made it clear it wasn't a request. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, and Eleonora sensed depths of history she didn't understand. Then Constantine bowed stiffly and released her, stepping back with obvious reluctance. "Be careful, Eleonora," he murmured, too low for Sebastian to hear. "The wolf may wear sheep's clothing, but his teeth remain sharp." Then Sebastian's hand was at her waist, his other hand clasping hers, and they were moving again. His touch was different from Constantine's, firmer, more possessive, sending unwanted heat through her carefully controlled exterior. "You came," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the music. "You invited me. It would have been rude to refuse, would it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You've never particularly worried about being rude before. I've learned discretion, have you? Then why arrive in Prince Volkonki's company? Why wear emerald green, my favorite color? Why hold your head so high when everyone expects you to enter in shame?" She missed a step, surprised by his knowledge of her choices, his understanding of her strategies. His hand steadied her instantly, drawing her fractionally closer. "You don't know anything about me anymore," she said, but it sounded less certain than she'd intended. "Don't I?" His grey-blue eyes held hers, and she saw pain there, old and unhealed. "I know you spent 7 years in a convent, reading philosophy and music. I know you learned 6 languages and corresponded with scholars across Europe. I know you grew herbs in the garden and played chess with Sister Margarevi. I know you never took vows because some part of you always intended to return." The blood drained from her face. "How do you know those things?" "Because I've been watching over you, Eleonora. For 7 years I've made sure you were safe, that you had books, that your studies were funded, that no one disturbed your peace. Anger flared hot and bright. You destroyed my life, and then you stalked me. I destroyed a reputation to save your life, he said, and there was such raw emotion in his voice that several nearby couples glanced their way. He lowered his voice again, but the intensity remained. Everything I did that night, every cruel word, every prophecy, every humiliation, I did to protect you. Protect me from what? The waltz ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Sebastian released her, stepping back, but his eyes never left her face. From the same thing that killed my wife, he said quietly. From the same conspiracy that murdered your father. From the truth that men die to protect. Meet me tonight. Midnight, the conservatory in the East Wing. Come alone, and I'll tell you everything. Before she could respond, he bowed formally and disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing in the center of the ballroom with her heart racing and her mind reeling. Are you quite all right, dear? Claudia appeared at her elbow, concern creasing her face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Perhaps I have, Eleonora murmured. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully neutral conversations. She danced with minor diplomats and elderly barons, smiled at veiled insults from the ladies, and played her part perfectly. But her mind was elsewhere, circling around Sebastian's words like a moth around flame. Could it be true? Could everything she'd believed for 7 years be wrong? At 11:30, she pleaded fatigue and asked Claudia to take her home. But instead of entering the carriage, she slipped away through the gardens. Her emerald gown changed for a dark cloak borrowed from an accommodating maid. The Belvedere's East Wing was largely unused during the Congress, its rooms closed and its halls dark. Eleonora navigated by memory and instinct, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give her away. The conservatory was at the end of a long corridor, its glass walls normally offering views of formal gardens, but now revealing only darkness and her own faint reflection. Sebastian was already there, standing among tropical plants that seemed absurdly lush against Vienna's frozen winter. He'd removed his jacket, his white shirt gleaming in the candlelight he'd arranged throughout the space. He looked younger like this, less the imposing duke, and more the man beneath. You came, he said, turning as she entered. You knew I would, I hoped. He gestured to a small iron bench near a fountain that trickled softly. Sit, please. This will take some time to explain. She sat, though every instinct screamed to remain standing, ready to flee. Then, explain. You said you destroyed me to save me. From what? Sebastian remained standing, one hand resting on the fountain's edge, his face shadowed by pain. 7 years ago, your father came to me. He was terrified. Eleonora. Shaking. He told me he'd discovered something while cataloguing documents from your grandfather's estate, ledgers, evidence of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Habsburg power. What conspiracy? Before Napoleon, there was a group of nobles, Stramaeum, Prussian, Russian, who profited enormously from war. They manipulated conflicts, provided weapons and loans to all sides, and amassed fortunes while Europe bled. When Napoleon fell, they faced exposure. The Congress of Vienna was meant to establish peace, but for them, it threatened their power and wealth. And my father discovered this. He discovered names, dates, proof of treason, murder, corruption on a scale that would topple governments. And he made the fatal mistake of sharing what he'd found with someone he thought he could trust. Who? Sebastian's jaw tightened. Prince von Manstein. He was your father's closest friend, or so everyone believed. In reality, Manstein was one of the conspiracy's chief architects. When your father showed him the documents, seeking advice, Manstein realized he had to act quickly. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so ugly, Eleonora almost didn't want to see it complete. They were going to kill my father. They were going to kill your entire family, Sebastian corrected, his voice rough with old anguish. Make it look like an accident. A fire, perhaps, or a carriage mishap. Everyone gone, problem solved, documents destroyed. But your father came to me first. He begged me to protect you. You specifically. Why me? Because you were 17 and innocent, and everything good that he'd brought into the world. Because he knew I had the power to hide you where even Manstein couldn't reach. And because, Sebastian stopped, turning away. Because what? Because he knew I loved you, Sebastian said quietly. It wasn't appropriate, it wasn't proper. You were so young and I was engaged to Isabella. But he knew. He saw how I looked at you and I thought no one was watching. And he used it. Eleonora's breath caught. You loved me? Desperately, hopelessly. He turned back, and the rawness in his face made her chest ache. So when your father asked me to save you, I agreed. But I couldn't just send you away that would raise questions, alert the conspiracy. I needed to give you a reason to disappear that no one would question. So I created a scandal so complete, so devastating, that your entire family would be forced to send you away for your own protection. The prophecy, she whispered. The prophecy, he confirmed. I stood in that ballroom and destroyed everything you were, everything you could have been, because it was the only way to save your life. I gave you a reason to hide that even Manstein would believe. The conservatory was silent, except for the trickling fountain and the sound of her own shallow breathing. 7 years of anger, pain, confusion, all of it shifting, reforming into a new shape. My father's accident, she said, 2 years ago. That wasn't an accident, was it? No. The conspiracy learned he still had copies of some documents hidden somewhere. They killed him hoping to find them, but he'd been clever. Whatever he knew, wherever he hid it, died with him. And your wife? Sebastian's face contracted with grief. Isabella was smarter than anyone gave her credit for. She realized I was hiding something, investigating something. She started asking questions, following leads. She discovered Manstein's connection to several suspicious deaths, and then his voice broke. Then she fell from our balcony during a storm. Except she didn't fall. She was pushed. By Manstein. By someone he hired. I've never been able to prove it, but I know. Just as I know that if I move against him without absolute proof, I'll end up dead and the conspiracy will continue. Eleonora stood, her legs unsteady, her entire worldview spinning. Why tell me this now? Why not tell me 7 years ago? Because 7 years ago, I needed you angry. I needed you to hate me, to have no reason to return to Vienna. If you'd known the truth, you might have tried to help, to investigate, and they would have killed you. And now? Now the situation has changed. Manstein is dying. Some wasting disease that doctors can't cure. He has perhaps 6 months to live. In his desperation to secure his legacy, he's been consolidating the conspiracy's assets, gathering the others for one final operation. Whatever they're planning will happen during the Congress, and when Manstein dies, the truth about the conspiracy could die with him. Unless we expose it first, Eleonora said. Unless we expose it first, Sebastian agreed. But Eleonora, this is dangerous beyond measure. These people have killed before, and they won't hesitate to kill again. If you're involved, if anyone suspects you're investigating, then I'll be in danger, just as I was 7 years ago. Except this time, I choose it." She moved closer to him, studying his face in the candlelight. "You gave me 7 years of safety I never asked for. You destroyed my reputation to preserve my life. That was your choice. Now I'm making mine. You could die. Everyone dies, Sebastian. The question is, what we live for first." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "You've become extraordinary." "I've become angry," she corrected. "I've become determined. And I've become someone who will not let my father's death, or your wife's death, or anyone else's death, be in vain." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and she felt the tremor in his touch. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every day for 7 years, I wondered if I'd made the right choice. If I'd destroyed something beautiful to save it, and whether that was noble or merely cowardice." "Both," she whispered. It was both. They stood there, inches apart, surrounded by exotic plants and candlelight, and the weight of 7 years of secrets. Eleonora's mind raced, trying to reconcile the man before her with the villain she'd hated, trying to understand if fury could transform into forgiveness. "I need time," she said finally, "to process this, to decide if I believe you, of course." He lowered his hand, stepping back. "But Eleonora ... Be careful. Trust no one completely. Not Constantine, not your brother, not even me. The conspiracy has eyes everywhere, even now, even here, especially here." He glanced toward the conservatory doors, and she saw something flash across his face. Fear. "You should go. We've been here too long already." She gathered her cloak, but at the door she paused. "Sebastian, thank you for telling me the truth, even if I'm not sure I can believe it yet. I understand." His smile was sad. "After all, the last time I claimed to see the truth, I used it to destroy you." Eleonora slipped back through the dark corridors, her mind churning. If Sebastian was telling the truth, then everything she'd believed was wrong. But if he was lying, if this was some elaborate manipulation, then she was walking directly into a trap. She needed answers. She needed proof. She needed Lady von Steinberg. She spun to find Constantine emerging from a shadowed alcove, his expression grave. "Your Highness, what are you doing here?" "Following you," he said bluntly. "I saw you leave the ball. I was concerned. I'm perfectly safe." "Are you? Or have you just been meeting secretly with the man who destroyed you? The man who has everything to gain by controlling you now?" She stiffened. "You were spying on me. I was protecting you," he corrected. "From yourself, if necessary. Sebastian von Reichardt is a master manipulator, Eleonora. Whatever he told you tonight is none of your concern, isn't it? Your father trusted me with his secrets. Before he died, he sent me half of a cipher key, told me you would have the other half. He said together we could unlock the truth. So yes, what Sebastian told you is very much my concern, especially if he's trying to seduce you away from the real investigation." Eleonora's heart raced. "I don't have any cipher key. Your father said you would. He said it was hidden in something you'd had since childhood, something so obvious you'd never question it. Her mother's pearls. The single strand she was wearing tonight. The one piece of jewelry she'd taken to the convent. The one constant companion through 7 years of exile. I need to examine something," she said abruptly. "Tomorrow. Can you meet me at the von Steinberg townhouse at 2 in the afternoon?" Constantine studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll be there. But Eleonora, please be careful. The closer we get to the truth, the more dangerous this becomes. Everyone keeps telling me that, she said, but no one seems to understand that danger is exactly why I returned. She left him standing in the corridor and made her way back to the waiting carriage, her fingers unconsciously touching the pearls at her throat. Her mother had given them to her on her 16th birthday, just a year before everything fell apart. "Always keep these close," her mother had said. "They've been in our family for generations, and they hold more value than you might think." At the time, Eleonora had assumed she meant sentimental value. Now she wondered if there was a different kind of treasure hidden in plain sight. Back at the townhouse, she dismissed the servants and locked herself in her room. The pearls gleamed in the candlelight, 32 perfect spheres strung on silk cord. She examined them carefully, looking for anything unusual: marks, imperfections, hidden compartments. Nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed something odd about the Kalashbey tiny Baroque medallion that had always seemed purely decorative. But when she looked closer, she saw minute engravings, so small they were almost invisible. Numbers, letters, a code. Her hands shook as she copied the engravings onto paper. 7K15 M3B2 2S9H. It meant nothing to her. But perhaps, combined with Constantine's half of the cipher, it would unlock whatever secrets her father had died protecting. She lay awake until dawn, her mind replaying the evening's revelations, Sebastian's confession, Constantine's warnings, the code hidden in her mother's pearls. Every answer seemed to generate 3 new questions, and she was beginning to understand that the truth might be far more complicated than she'd imagined. The conspiracy Sebastian described, powerful nobles profiting from war, made terrible sense given Vienna's current political situation. The Congress was reshaping Europe, deciding which nations would rise and which would fall. There would be winners and losers, and those with advanced knowledge could position themselves to benefit enormously. But could she trust Sebastian's version of events? He'd lied before, however noble his claimed motives. What if this was another deception, a more sophisticated trap? And Constantine, why had her father trusted him? What was the Russian prince's real interest in exposing the conspiracy? Was he truly an ally, or did he have his own agenda? Sleep finally claimed her as the sun rose over Vienna, painting the frost-covered city in shades of gold and pink. Her last thought, before unconsciousness, was of Sebastian's face in the candlelight, the way his hand had trembled when he touched her cheek. Whatever the truth was, she would find it, even if it destroyed her all over again. The afternoon sun barely penetrated the heavy curtains of the von Steinberg townhouse drawing room when Constantine arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. He brought with him a leather portfolio, his expression serious. "You found something," he said immediately, seeing her face. Eleonora nodded, withdrawing the paper with the code she'd copied. "The clasp on my mother's pearls. But I don't understand what it means." Constantine's eyes lit with excitement. He opened his portfolio, pulling out a similar piece of paper covered in his elegant handwriting. "Your father's final letter to me contained these coordinates and numbers. Separately, they're meaningless. But combined," he placed the 2 papers side by side, and suddenly the random letters and numbers aligned into a pattern. "It's a map," Eleonora breathed. "A location here in Vienna." "The Hofburg Palace," Constantine confirmed, pointing to the decoded coordinates. "Specifically, the Imperial Library's restricted archives. Your father hid the documents there in plain sight, where only someone with both halves of the cipher could find them. Can we access those archives? With difficulty. They're normally restricted to Habsburg family members and certain trusted scholars. However, he smiled slightly. I happen to be conducting research on Slavic diplomatic history. I have permission to access certain sections. If we're clever, if we're quick, we might be able to retrieve what your father hid. When? Tonight. During the Imperial Opera performance. The palace will be emptier than usual, and those remaining will be distracted. Eleonora's pulse quickened. This was what she'd come to Vienna for: answers, truth, justice for her father. But Sebastian's warnings echoed in her mind. These people have killed before. There's something you should know, she said, and proceeded to tell Constantine about her conversation with Sebastian, leaving nothing out. She watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of deception or reaction. When she finished, Constantine was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, I believe parts of his story are true. I know, for instance, that Prince von Manstein is indeed dying, and that he's been acting erratically, consolidating assets. I know that Sebastian's wife died under suspicious circumstances, but, she prompted, but Sebastian himself may be part of the conspiracy, not its enemy. Think about it, Eleonora. He's perfectly positioned, trusted by the Emperor, connected to every major power, above suspicion. What better cover for a conspirator than to pose as the man investigating the conspiracy? It was a possibility she'd considered and dismissed, then reconsidered through the sleepless night. If that's true, why tell me anything at all? To control you, to know what you're investigating, to ensure you follow the trail he wants you to follow, not the real truth. Constantine leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. I'm not saying he's definitely involved, but I am saying we can't trust him completely. Not until we see the documents your father hid. It was sound logic, frustrating as it was. Trust no one, Sebastian had said. Perhaps he'd been including himself in that warning. Tonight then, she agreed. But I want your word, Constantine. Whatever we find, we expose it together. No using the information for Russian diplomatic advantage, no political games. Justice only. You have my word. He extended his hand, and she shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. Tonight we become treasure hunters in a palace full of secrets. After he left, Eleonora spent the afternoon preparing. She selected a dark dress, suitable for moving through shadows, practical boots instead of dancing slippers, and arranged her hair in a simple style that wouldn't impede movement. She felt like she was preparing for battle, which perhaps she was. Friedrich found her as she was about to leave. Where are you going dressed like a servant? Research, she said shortly. At night. Alone. His eyes narrowed. Eleonora, what are you involved in? She studied her brother, this man who'd failed her once before. Could she trust him now? Did she have any choice? Father was murdered, she said bluntly, and watched his face pale. The riding accident was staged. He discovered something dangerous, and he died for it. Tonight, I'm going to find out what he knew. That's insane. That's if what you're saying is true, you're putting yourself in terrible danger. Yes, then I'm coming with you. No. She placed a hand on his arm. Friedrich, if something goes wrong, someone needs to know where I've gone and what I was looking for. Someone needs to be able to continue the investigation if I can't. Can you be that person? Fear and shame warred in his expression. I failed you once, then don't fail me again. She left him standing in the hallway, looking older than his years, the weight of his previous choices heavy on his shoulders. The opera that evening was Mozart's Don Giovanni, appropriately, a tale of deception and damnation. Constantine met her at a servant's entrance to the Hofburg, both of them dressed unremarkably enough to avoid notice. The palace was indeed quieter than usual, with most of the court attending the performance. "The restricted archives are in the East Wing," Constantine whispered as they moved through dimly lit corridors. 3 floors up, past the state apartments. "I have keys to the main library, but the restricted section has additional locks. Can you open them?" He smiled slightly. "I didn't survive 10 years in Russian intelligence without learning to open doors not meant for me." They climbed servants' stairs, avoiding the main passages where guards would be stationed. Eleonora's heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would give them away, but they encountered no one. The palace seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The Imperial Library was magnificent, even in darkness, shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. Ancient manuscripts behind glass, the smell of old paper and leather binding. Constantine led her past the main reading room to a locked door marked Archive Private. His lockpicks made quick work of the first lock, but the second proved more difficult. Minutes ticked by as he worked, sweat beading his forehead despite the cold. Almost there, the lock clicked open. The restricted archives were smaller than Eleonora expected, more cabinet than room. Shelves lined with document boxes, each labeled with dates and catalogue numbers. They consulted the decoded cipher, which had given them a specific location: Cabinet 7, Box 15. "Section B, that doesn't make sense," Constantine muttered, studying the numbering system. "Cabinet 7 doesn't have 15 boxes. It only goes to 12. Eleonora examined the cabinet more closely. And then she saw it, a false back panel, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. She pressed on it gently, and it swung open, revealing 3 additional boxes hidden behind. Box 15 was there, covered in dust. With trembling hands she opened it. Inside were folders stuffed with papers, ledgers, financial records. And on top, a letter addressed in her father's distinctive handwriting. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. I tried to do the right thing, and it cost me everything. But the truth matters more than one man's life. Expose them, make them pay. For Isabella, for all of us." "Mers, Isabella," Eleonora breathed. He mentioned Sebastian's wife specifically. Constantine was already rifling through the papers, his expression growing darker with each page. "My God, your father was right. It's all here: names, dates, amounts. They've been manipulating European conflicts for 30 years. They orchestrated border disputes, assassinations, even small wars. The profits are staggering." "Who?" Eleonora asked, looking over his shoulder. "Who's involved?" "Prince von Manstein, as Sebastian said. But also," Constantine's voice faltered, "also Archduke Leopold, Count von Trautenberg, Baron von Stein. These are some of the most powerful men in the Habsburg Empire. If we expose this, we'll be challenging the foundations of Austrian power," Eleonora finished. "No wonder they killed to protect it." She was flipping through the documents when she found something that made her blood run cold. A letter dated 3 years ago, in Manstein's handwriting. "The Reichardt woman knows too much. She must be eliminated before the Emperor returns from Prague. Arrange an accident. Make it look like suicide if possible. Her unstable temperament makes it believable. Isabella." They'd planned her murder in writing, confident they would never be exposed. And beneath it, another letter, dated 7 years earlier: "Steinberg has become a liability. His conscience makes him weak. He will not keep our secrets. The family must be eliminated before the Congress begins. Fire would be best. Claim it was an accident with candles. Ensure no one survives. Eleonora, Constantine's voice was urgent. We need to go. Now. We'll take the essential documents, and the door slammed open. Lamplight flooded the small space, revealing 4 figures silhouetted in the doorway. Eleonora's heart stopped as she recognized them. Prince von Manstein, gaunt and grey with illness, but still formidable. 2 guards in imperial livery, and Sebastian. Eleonora, Sebastian said, his voice full of warning and regret. You shouldn't have come here. How did you know we were here? She demanded, even as her hand instinctively clutched the papers she held. Because I've been having you followed since you returned to Vienna, Manstein answered, his voice thin and riddy with sickness. Did you think you could investigate discreetly? You've been clumsy, obvious. Fortunately, the Duke here has been keeping me informed of your activities. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Eleonora's eyes met Sebastian's, searching for denial, explanation, anything. What she saw there was complex, shame, pain, determination, but not surprise. Sebastian, she whispered, tell me it's not true. I told you to trust no one, he said quietly. I included myself in that warning. Touching, Manstein sneered, but ultimately meaningless. Guards, take the documents, kill the Russian. As for Lady von Steinberg, he considered her with rheumy eyes. She'll have to disappear. Another tragic accident. The von Steinberg family seems prone to them. No. Sebastian's voice cut through the space like a blade. That wasn't our agreement, Manstein. Our agreement. The prince laughed, a wet, ugly sound. You don't make agreements with me, boy. You follow orders. Or have you forgotten what I hold over you? I haven't forgotten. Sebastian's hand moved to his waistcoat, and Eleonora saw the outline of a pistol there. But I'm done following orders from a dying man desperate to preserve his legacy of corpses. The tension in the room ratcheted to breaking point. The guards' hands moved to their weapons. Constantine edged closer to Eleonora, positioning himself between her and Manstein. And Sebastian looked at her one more time with those complicated, grey-blue eyes. Run, he said. Then everything exploded into chaos. Sebastian drew his pistol in one smooth motion, firing at the lamp one guard held. Glass shattered, plunging half the room into darkness. Constantine grabbed Eleonora's arm, pulling her toward the door as the second guard drew his sword. The documents, she shouted, but Constantine was already moving, tucking the most crucial papers inside his coat as they ran. Behind them, she heard shouting, the sound of a scuffle, Manstein's reedy voice screaming orders. They burst out of the archives into the main library, knocking over a chair in their haste. This way. Constantine pulled her toward a different staircase, one that led down to the palace kitchens. Behind them, footsteps pounded on marble. They fled through servants' passages, past startled kitchen staff, through storage rooms that smelled of flour and wine. Eleonora's lungs burned, her practical boots slipping on worn stone stairs. We need to split up, Constantine said breathlessly. If they catch us together, they get the documents. You go to your townhouse. I'll go to the Russian embassy. Tomorrow we expose everything, Eleonora finished. He pressed half the documents into her hands, keeping the rest himself. Be careful. Trust no one. And Eleonora, he paused, his dark eyes serious. Don't trust Sebastian. Whatever game he's playing, he's too deep in it to be saved. Then he was gone, disappearing down a side corridor as the footsteps behind them grew louder. Eleonora ran in the opposite direction, her heart hammering. the papers crackling against her chest where she'd hidden them beneath her cloak. She emerged from the palace through a laundry room exit into the freezing Vienna night. The city was alive with carriages returning from the opera, their occupants warm and well-fed, unaware that, in the palace's heart, the foundations of their world were cracking. She made it back to the townhouse, slipping in through the servants' entrance. Friedrich was waiting in the drawing room, pacing frantically. "Thank God," he breathed when he saw her. "I've been imagining. You're hurt." "I'm fine." She pulled out the documents. "But Friedrich, everything's worse than we thought. It's not just Manstein. It's Archduke Leopold. It's half the Imperial Council. The corruption goes to the very top of Habsburg power." Her brother's face went white as she showed him the evidence, the letters planning Isabella's murder, the records of manipulated wars, the proof of 30 years of treasonous conspiracy. "If we expose this," he said slowly, "it will tear Austria apart. In the middle of the Congress, with all of Europe watching, it could spark revolution, war, I know. And if we don't, then they continue killing. They continue profiting from suffering. They continue destroying anyone who threatens them." She met his eyes. "I need to know, Friedrich, when the moment comes, when we have to decide whether to expose this or protect the Empire, whose side will you be on?" He was silent for a long moment, the weight of the question crushing. Finally he said, "Father's. I'll be on Father's side, the side of truth, whatever it costs." "Good." She squeezed his hand. "Because tomorrow we're going to change everything. But first, she had to survive the night." She dismissed Friedrich to his bed and sat alone in the drawing room, reading through the documents by candlelight. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering: assassinations across 3 decades, wars orchestrated for profit, treaties manipulated to benefit a small group of nobles who would enrich themselves on Europe's blood. And throughout it all, one name kept appearing as witness, as messenger, as the man who smoothed over complications: Sebastian von Reichardt. Her heart ached with a confusion of emotions, betrayal, rage, and underneath it all, a stubborn thread of doubt. Because the Sebastian in these documents didn't match the man she'd met in the conservatory, the man who'd claimed to love her, the man who'd told her to run tonight. What game was he really playing? A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. It was well past midnight. Who would call at this hour? She went herself, rather than wake the servants, checking through the peephole first. Her breath caught. Sebastian stood on her doorstep, blood on his white shirt, his face drawn with exhaustion. Against every instinct of self-preservation, she opened the door. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know." He swayed slightly, and she realized the blood was his. "But I needed to explain, and I needed to warn you. Manstein is dying, Eleonora. He has days, maybe hours. He's given orders to eliminate everyone who knows about the conspiracy, Hume, Constantine, anyone who could testify. Before he dies, he wants to ensure his legacy is protected. Why should I believe anything you say?" "You shouldn't." He leaned against the doorframe, his face pale. "I've lied to you, manipulated you, betrayed you. I've done terrible things in service of this conspiracy. But I need you to understand, I did it to stay close, to gather evidence, to find a way to expose them from within. Everything I've done for the past 3 years, since Isabella died, has been working toward this moment. Prove it." He reached into his coat, his movements slow, pained, and withdrew a small leather journal. "This is Isabella's diary, the one she kept in the weeks before she died. Read it. It explains everything about Manstein, about the conspiracy, about me." Eleonora took the journal. its leather cover worn soft with handling. Why give this to me now? Because Manstein's guards shot me tonight. The wound isn't fatal, but I don't know how much time I have. If they realize I'm still alive, they'll come for me. And when they do, he met her eyes, and she saw the truth there, raw and painful. When they do, I need someone to know that I tried, that in the end, I chose the right side. Even if it was too late. Sebastian read the diary. Eleonora. Tomorrow, at noon, there's a meeting of the Congress's inner council at the Hofburg. Manstein will be there. It's likely his last public appearance before death takes him. If you're going to expose the conspiracy, that's your moment. Every major power will be represented. You'll have witnesses who can't be silenced or bribed. You're asking me to walk into the heart of enemy territory and accuse the most powerful men in Austria of murder and treason. Yes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I told you that you'd become extraordinary. Prove me right. Then he was gone, disappearing into the Vienna night, leaving only bloodstains on her doorstep and a diary that might hold either truth or another elaborate lie. Eleonora returned to the drawing room and opened Isabella's diary with trembling hands. The writing was elegant, educated, the thoughts of a woman who was far more intelligent than her society allowed her to be. March 15th, 1822. I know Sebastian keeps secrets from me. I thought at first it was another woman, perhaps that young von Steinberg girl he used to look at with such longing. But it's something darker. He meets with Prince von Manstein in private, comes home troubled, won't explain what they discuss. I've started investigating on my own. April 2nd, 1822, I found letters. Sebastian has been tracking financial irregularities, money moving between Manstein, Leopold, and others. War profiteering, I think. Sebastian suspects they've been manipulating conflicts for profit. He's trying to gather proof. May 18th, 1822, Sebastian caught me reading his papers. He was furious, terrified, made me promise to stop investigating. But how can I, knowing what I know? How can I pretend ignorance when people are dying for these men's greed? June 30th, 1822. I've been followed. I'm certain of it. A man in a grey coat, always half a block behind. Sebastian says I'm imagining things, but I know better. They suspect I know something. August 3rd, 1822. Someone searched our house while we were at the opera. Nothing obvious taken, but my private papers were disturbed. Sebastian still won't tell me the full truth, says he's protecting me. But silence isn't protection, it's a cage. The final entry was dated 2 days before Isabella's death, August 12th, 1822. I confronted Manstein today. Foolish perhaps, but I couldn't remain silent. I told him I knew about the conspiracy, that I had proof. He smiled at me, that terrible grandfatherly smile, and said, "My dear Isabella, proof means nothing without credibility. And who would believe the accusations of a woman known for nervous melancholy?" That's when I understood. They've been building a narrative about me for months. Whispers of instability, depression, erratic behavior. If I die, everyone will believe it was suicide. And Sebastian would be powerless to prove otherwise without exposing himself. I'm writing this as insurance. If something happens to me, if I fall or take my own life, know that it was murder. Know that Sebastian was trying to protect me, but couldn't. Know that the conspiracy is real and must be stopped. And Sebastian, you're reading this, I forgive you. I understand why you kept secrets. I understand that you were trying to shield me from danger. But please, don't let my death be meaningless. Finish what we started. Expose them. Make them pay." Eleonora closed the diary, tears streaming down her face. For Isabella, who'd been murdered for seeking truth. For her father, killed for the same reason. For Sebastian, trapped between duty and love, trying to save everyone and succeeding at saving no one. The truth was more complicated than she'd imagined. Sebastian wasn't the villain or the hero. He was a man making impossible choices, failing and trying again, living with the weight of his mistakes. Just like her. She sat in that drawing room until dawn broke over Vienna, planning her strategy. At noon, she would walk into the Congress's inner council meeting. She would present the evidence. She would name names and demand justice. And if they tried to silence her, if they tried to dismiss her as they'd dismissed Isabella, she had an insurance policy. Konstantin's half of the documents, safely at the Russian embassy. If anything happened to her, he would release everything. The game was entering its final move. At 11 o'clock, dressed in her finest day, dressed deep blue silk that gave her courage, Eleonora prepared to leave. Friedrich insisted on accompanying her, and she didn't argue. If she was walking into danger, at least she wouldn't do it alone. But as they reached the door, a messenger arrived, a note sealed with the imperial crest. With trembling hands, Eleonora opened it. "Lady von Steinberg, your presence is requested at an emergency meeting of the Congress's inner council at noon today. The matter concerns allegations of corruption at the highest levels of government. Your testimony is required. Come alone, or your evidence will be dismissed as conspiracy." Prince Clemens von Metternich. "It's a trap," Friedrich said immediately. "They know what you're planning. They're trying to isolate you." "Or," Eleonora said slowly, "someone's given me the opportunity I need. Metternich isn't part of the conspiracy. I checked the documents. If he's calling this meeting, it means someone has informed him. Someone inside has turned. Who? Sebastian. It was the only explanation. He's forcing the confrontation himself, then he's signing his own death warrant. If he exposes Manstein, they'll kill him, I know." She tucked the documents into a reticule. "But he's doing it anyway, which means I have to do my part." She kissed Friedrich's cheek. "If I don't return by evening, go to the Russian embassy. Ask for Prince Volkonsky. He'll know what to do." Then, before her courage could fail, she set out for the Hofburg Palace and whatever waited there. The inner council met in the marble room, a chamber designed to intimidate, with its columns of rose-veined marble and ceiling frescoes depicting Habsburg military victories. Around an enormous table sat the most powerful men in Europe: Prince Metternich, the Austrian foreign minister; Lord Castlereagh, representing Britain; Tsar Alexander's representative from Russia; the Prussian delegation; and various Austrian nobles, including Archduke Leopold and Count von Trautenberg. And at the table's foot, looking more corpse than man, sat Prince von Manstein. Eleonora entered with her head high, ignoring the shocked whispers her presence caused. Women didn't attend council meetings, but then, women didn't usually accuse half the council of treason either. "Lady von Steinberg," Metternich said, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for attending. I understand you have information regarding serious crimes." "I do, Your Highness." She placed her documents on the table. "I have proof that several members of this council have been engaged in a conspiracy spanning 30 years. They've manipulated wars, ordered assassinations, and profited from European bloodshed. My father died investigating them. So did Countess Isabella von Reichardt. The silence that followed was absolute. Then chaos erupted, denials, accusations, demands for her arrest. "This is absurd," Archduke Leopold thundered. "The ravings of a disgraced woman with a grudge, is it?" Metternich's voice cut through the noise. "Then you won't mind if we examine her evidence." He began reading through the documents, his face growing darker with each page. The other foreign delegations watched with keen interest. Here was Austrian dirty laundry being aired before all of Europe. "These are forgeries," Manstein said, his thin voice somehow carrying. "Clever forgeries designed to destabilize Austria during the Congress. This woman has been seen consorting with Russian agents. This is obviously a plot. Enough." The voice came from the doorway, and every head turned. Sebastian stood there, supported by 2 guards, but not as prisoner. He wore his full ducal regalia, medals gleaming on his chest, and carried himself with the authority of his position, despite the obvious pain from his wound. "The documents are authentic," he said, moving slowly into the room. "I know because I helped compile them. For 3 years since my wife's murder, I've been gathering evidence against this conspiracy. Prince von Manstein, Archduke Leopold, Count von Trautenberg, Baron von Stein, all of them have profited from war while thousands died. Sebastian, what are you doing?" Manstein's voice held warning and fear in equal measure. "What I should have done years ago." Sebastian reached the table, placing his own stack of documents beside Eleonora's. "I have financial records showing money transfers. I have letters in Manstein's hand ordering Isabella's death and the death of Baron von Steinberg. I have testimony from soldiers who were paid to create incidents that escalated into conflicts. All of it authenticated, all of it damning." "You'll destroy yourself," Leopold shouted. "You're as complicit as any of us." "Yes," Sebastian agreed. "I am. I helped cover their crimes because Manstein held evidence against my father. For years, I chose family honor over justice. But I'm tired of living in service to evil men." Metternich studied him. "By confessing, you're condemning yourself. I know, some things are worth more than survival." Manstein surged up. "This is treason. I'll see you destroyed." "Sit down, Manstein." Metternich's voice was ice. "Guards, arrest Prince von Manstein, Archduke Leopold, and Count von Trautenberg. Charges: conspiracy to murder, treason, war profiteering." As guards arrested the conspirators, Manstein locked eyes with Eleonora. "You've destroyed us all, girl. I should have killed you 7 years ago, but you didn't," Eleonora said calmly. "Because Sebastian stopped you. He sacrificed everything to save my life, and today I'm saving his soul." After the arrested men were removed, Metternich turned to Sebastian. "Duke von Reichardt, your cooperation is appreciated. However, your complicity cannot be overlooked. You'll be under house arrest pending trial. Your title and estates will likely be forfeit. I understand." Eleonora stepped forward. "Your Highness, Duke von Reichardt, was coerced. More importantly, for 3 years, he gathered evidence at personal risk. Without his information, we couldn't prosecute these men. Justice should be nuanced exile, perhaps, or censure, but not imprisonment for a man who chose truth over self-preservation." "Why defend him?" Metternich asked. "This man destroyed your reputation, because suffering teaches us that people can be both villain and victim. That love and betrayal can coexist. That sometimes the person who hurts us most is also trying hardest to save us." Metternich nodded. "Very well. Duke von Reichardt remains under house arrests pending trial. Lady von Steinberg's testimony will be considered. Now, both of you leave. We must determine how to present this disaster without triggering international crises." Outside, Sebastian's guards allowed them privacy. "Thank you," Sebastian said. "You didn't have to speak for me. I meant what I said. About redemption. About complicated truths. What will you do now?" "Reclaim my place, on my own terms." She smiled. "I've become extraordinary, just as you knew I would. Will you write to me? During my house arrest?" "Yes. We have 7 years of conversations to catch up on." His smile was genuine, heartbreakingly young. "Then perhaps something good can come from this wreckage." 3 months later, Sebastian's trial concluded. The verdict: exile, 5 years in Switzerland. Title and estates forfeit, but personal wealth intact. Eleonora's testimony and his cooperation had saved him from worse. Manstein died in prison. Leopold and Trautenberg received lengthy sentences. The conspiracy was over. On Sebastian's last day in Vienna, Eleonora visited him. "This is for you." He handed her a leather folder. "The deed to your family's estates. I've purchased them back, Sebastian. I can't consider it partial payment for 7 years I stole. It can never be enough, but it's a start." They stood in weighted silence. "Write to me," she said finally. "From Switzerland. Tell me about the man you're becoming. Will you answer? Yes. Because our story isn't finished. It's paused, waiting for us to heal. 5 years seems long. I've already waited 7. What's 5 more?" At the threshold, he paused. "The prophecy I made, I chose that lie because I knew you were strong enough to survive it. You had a core of steel, even at 17. That's a terrible compliment, but true." She left him and returned to the family estates, now hers. She threw herself into the work, corresponded with scholars, wrote essays published under a pseudonym, and learned to be happy. Once a week, a letter arrived from Switzerland. Sebastian wrote about mountains and becoming someone new. She wrote back, sharing her journey. They were building something from ruins, not forgiveness yet, but understanding. And from understanding, perhaps someday, something more. 5 years passed like a heartbeat and an eternity. The day Sebastian returned, unseasonably warm for early spring, Eleonora stood in the Belvedere Gardens, where he'd once warned her. His footsteps on gravel announced him. When she turned, he was there, older, tanned, lighter somehow. "Eleonora, Sebastian." 5 years of letters made flesh. She saw the man he'd become, quieter, wiser, at peace. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I promised. 5 years is long. Promises fade, not this one." She moved closer, feeling the pull matured now, steadier. "Not this promise. What happens now?" "I have no title, limited wealth, a tarnished reputation. Good. I don't want those things. I want midnight conversations and philosophical arguments. I want someone who understands the world is complicated and beautiful. Someone who knows love can coexist with hurt, that forgiveness is a process, that happiness sometimes leads through darkness. That's very specific. I've had 5 years to think about it." He smiled genuinely. "Then perhaps dinner. Simple, quiet, where 2 people who've destroyed and saved each other can figure out what's next." "Perfect." He offered his arm. Together, they walked from the gardens, past fountains and statues, past memories of survival. Vienna spread before them, beautiful and corrupt, a city that had witnessed their destruction and would now witness what they built from ruins. 7 years ago, a false prophecy tore them apart. Today, a true promise brought them together. In the space between destruction and creation, between past and future, 2 complicated souls found their way towards something that might, with patience and care and endless forgiveness, become love.